Hello YouTube, got another Axis and Allies 1914 video for you. If you didn't guess from the name of this video, today we're going to be taking a look at the Ottoman Empire. Now, if you are not new to this channel, you know I've posted a couple of videos in the past about the Ottomans, and if you were maybe looking forward to playing them, maybe those videos made you a little bit depressed about it. I'm sorry if that happened. The reason for that is I tend to favor as the Allies an Ottoman first strategy. They are the weakest of the Central Powers, and so I like to kind of try to pull out all the stops to take them out as quickly as possible, put them in economic collapse. I've run a few scenarios. Usually I can make that happen by the second turn. Putting them in political collapse is a lot more difficult if they're paying attention, but if they're not, that is something you can potentially do very early in game as well. But I got to thinking recently, what if that wasn't the case? I remember back to my very first game playing 1914, I was Austria and the Ottomans. I had a friend who was Germany, and the Allies pretty much ignored me. I'm not going to be simulating exactly what happened in that game, but that got me thinking, well, what would it look like if the Allies basically did the bare minimum down here, let's say, England with its different transports, if France doesn't move its transports across the Mediterranean, if Italy is distracted doing something else, if Russia, doesn't attack Mesopotamia, England doesn't build up in India, what prospects does that offer for the Ottomans? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But real quick, before I go into that, just a quick reminder for those new to the channel, I recently published my very first book. It is a science fiction novel entitled Cosmic Fate. I have a physical copy of it over here, available in hardcover and paperback, as well as an ebook. It's available on Amazon.com, as well as the Apple bookstore, as well as BarnesandNoble.com. And my publisher that I went through, Ex Libris, also has it on their website. So there's my little personal plug, big accomplishment for me. If you enjoy sci-fi, I strongly encourage you to at least take a look at it. If it looks like something you'd enjoy, I'd appreciate the purchase, a little bit of support. But if not, that's fine too. I just want to make you all aware of it because it is a very big deal for me to have that happen. Been working on it for a while. Now, back to the topic at hand. So, a few countries go before the Ottomans. They're not one of the earlier countries. So, I've simulated a few things about, likely moves. Don't count the exact number of troops anywhere. I just kind of moved guys around. For example, with the Austrian attack on Venice, I didn't even remove casualties. The important thing to understand is that there is something going on over there. The Italians are going to be a little bit distracted with that. In this situation, we're going to assume that they are not going to try and expend anything to go after the Ottomans. Same thing with France over there. As we move up, you see that the Austrians invaded Serbia. The important thing is they're at least going to have a handful of troops there. They're going to have troops in Galatia. Now, I didn't set up the countries that are not going to pertain to this video. So the only troops of England's that I set up are the ones down in the Middle East and North Africa. France is not set up because, again, their land forces aren't going to matter, and we're assuming in this scenario that their naval forces are not going to be a threat. Their naval forces may be moved into the North Atlantic to chase down some German submarines or something like that. As we move over, we see Austria's movements. We don't have Germany's movements, but we're going to assume that, that they have, moved into Belgium, are threatening France in the normal way over in the west, and in the east, that Germany, Austria, and Russia are kind of having a standoff. Poland, of course, is very strategic of a location because of how much it borders. Ukraine is a very similar thing. So in this scenario, Russia has fortified both of those territories. They've taken they brought Romania in on their side, and they've moved their infantry. I think I moved like one extra infantry to Sevastopol, and the rest of it's just what happens to start there. Everything else they kind of shifted forward. So that is the world that the Ottomans have. I'm sorry, one more thing. The British moved into Transjordan. There really is no reason for them not to do that. They have an overwhelming force in Egypt. Just move across there, take it. And then similarly, they dropped off guys in Arabia, brought in a neutral on their side. Now, maybe this force in India, maybe it moved to Afghanistan, maybe it moved to Persia, maybe it just stayed there. I wouldn't really recommend them sitting there, even if they don't want to attack Mesopotamia. They should at least do something with that army. But what's important here is that it is not threatening Mesopotamia, and we're going to assume that at least on the first turn, if it did move into Persia, it's getting bogged down. And now we've got Ottoman units there, because it would come in on the side of the Ottomans, that we could then use to our advantage. But I don't want to speculate too much on that. Maybe we'll talk about it later. So this is the world that the Ottomans live in. It is markedly different, markedly improved from their first turn in some of my other videos, because very little emphasis has been placed on them in terms of the Allies' strategy. So, what can they do? Well, in this situation, when they're not being threatened all along their coastline, they can easily bog the British down into Transjordan. I would still recommend probably not going after Arabia, just because they don't have as many forces that can go down there. Maybe you put up a defense in the Syrian desert, but it's only worth one production, and I almost would say use this infantry to do something else, like have him come over here and help in that situation, or send him over to Mesopotamia for a turn 2 move. Now, if the British attacked Persia, so we're swinging back around to that topic, if they did, Persia is probably going to be contested, which means we can shift units over there. It's contested with now Ottoman troops, and so we can easily move our guys over from Mesopotamia, move them from Ankara, move the infantry from Syrian desert, and crush the British force that's over there. So if Britain actually invades Persia, that really isn't a bad thing for us, because then when we crush them, especially if they didn't really build much in India, now we can easily strike India, we can threaten Kazakhstan, and we can still threaten Sevastopol. So that actually puts the Allies in a very awkward position if England invades Persia and doesn't build backup troops over here. If they don't invade Persia, let's say they're just sitting there, we can still align ourselves. We're not threatened all along our coast. We can shift a bunch of units over to Mesopotamia, and we can really steamroll into Sevastopol on turn 2 at exactly the moment that the Russians are looking for every possible spare unit to shift up here against the onslaught of Germany and Austria. Those other two Central Powers are really going to be coming hot and heavy for Russia, turn 2 and especially turn 3. And Russia is not going to have the forces to fight everybody, and you can easily sneak in here, get Sevastopol, potentially Kazakhstan, like I said, if that situation occurs in Persia. In addition to that, you are free now to move into Bulgaria. You now border Austrian-controlled territory. The Austrians, assuming they don't have an emergency they have to tend to, are going to be able to move their troops from Serbia, possibly with some from Galicia, into Romania. Probably won't be able to take it, but they'll be able to significantly soften it up. And then guess what? On Russia's turn, it probably isn't going to be able to divert more troops down there because it's got the Poland-Ukraine situation. You take your army from Bulgaria, which is at least equal in size to the army in Romania, from the leaning neutral troops, the 5 infantry and artillery, plus the infantry you move in, sweep into Romania, probably kill whatever units Austria didn't kill. Now Bulgaria belongs to you, Romania belongs to you, Sevastopol potentially belongs to you on the second turn. So now you're up 9 production The Ottomans start with 16. You've increased your production by over 50% by turn 2. And then, while Russia is desperately trying to defend over here, or potentially, gets pushed back to Moscow and Ukraine, or, Poland and Belarus and Moscow, or something like that, you now have access, while your allies, other central powers are, forcing their way through here, you can easily snatch up Tartarstan and Kazakhstan. Granted, they're only worth 1 each, but you're just kind of sneaking in through the back here and just grabbing Russian territory. There's not a whole lot the Russians are going to be able to do about it unless they want their entire front to collapse. So you've got that going on for you. At the same time, there's this large force of British troops that came in from Egypt. Well, if England isn't actively building in India, how is it going, and especially, if you're directly threatening it over here, how exactly are they going to continue to reinforce in North Africa? There's a couple Italian units over there, maybe there's an infantry or two from France, not really a whole lot going on. So if you have, a situation well in hand over here because your allies are bogging the Russians down and you're just, grabbing up these territories along the south and then up this way, what's stopping you from coming down here? You just have to defeat this force here, do a little bit of mopping up. It might be, up here, up in the north, we were talking about turn 2. This might be a turn 3 or a turn 4 thing, and things in the rest of the world, of course, are going to be very critical at that point, with the United States coming in, people being able to buy tanks, the buildup on the Western Front, that sort of thing. But for you, you're just concerned about what's around you. You're hoping that your allies are doing well. Certainly they will be if Russia is in that kind of position. But you can't worry about what's going on over here on Germany's Western Front. You've got to worry about doing the best you can where you are. So you beat off the British advance. They don't have a whole lot following it up, a handful of troops. You can pretty much devote almost everything in terms of your production to just sweeping down here. You can easily start taking Egypt, sweeping across this way. You'll probably start bumping into the Americans, around here, and they may gradually push you back, but then that means they're not focused somewhere else. So in terms of the Central Powers as a whole, that's not terrible. Plus, by that point, you'll have a decent amount of production. If you had the 9 from Russia plus a couple from Egypt, you will actually be able to outproduce the United States. Now, you also have to transport your guys from Constantinople, get them down here, but the Americans have to transport them across the coast as well. So both of you are far from your supply lines. You're probably going to hit an equilibrium somewhere around mid-North Africa, maybe Libya, maybe Tunisia, somewhere in there. You're probably going to be able to hang on to Egypt. But at the same time, you can swing down this way, start grabbing up these territories that are worth 1. There's not going to be a whole lot that can stop you, especially if you can devote the vast majority of your production that way. Like I said, Russia's going to be tied up. You probably are not going to need too many units up there. And if you coordinate well with the Austrians, if the Austrians break through the Russian front, then you should be good there. Probably won't need to devote a whole lot more resources to that. So let's count this up. You got Bulgaria, 3, Romania, another 3, Sevastopol, another 3, so 9, Tartarstan, 10, Kazakhstan, another 1, potentially Persia. So that, that gives us even more. So now we're up to 13, let's see, 9, 10, 11, yeah, 13, Arabia 14, Egypt 15, 16, let's say, Egypt, Sudan, 17, Libya, 18. You've more than doubled your production with the Ottoman Empire at that point. And depending on what goes on, you might be able to pass further into North Africa, pass further into Africa itself. You could potentially, depending on how things go, build a navy. Now, typically, if the Allies are focusing heavily on getting Navy down there, it's going to take a decent amount to fend them off. But again, if the French and British, Navy, they haven't put anything else down here. French Navy is up there. You've eliminated, the British forces down here pretty much. Or maybe you've even taken India, who knows. You might be able to start building Navy. You could probably put Italy out of its misery. I'm sure the Austrians would really appreciate that. That isn't something that I would focus on early. I would recommend building up your empire first, that base of production, and then just kind of steamrolling Africa. At that point, maybe building a navy, start moving across the Mediterranean, rebuild the Ottoman Empire, so to speak, at its height, in a sense. Maybe in a little bit different directions, but you get the idea. So if the Allies do not really focus heavily on the Ottomans, they actually do have a lot of potential, because Russia's going to have its hands full. England is the only other power that can devote significant resources down here because of India, and if they don't, there's not a whole lot that's stopping the Ottomans from just kind of running amok and grabbing up some easy production. You can't necessarily count on that, but if they do start leaving you alone, they're thinking, oh, they're the sick man of Europe. I want to fight Germany. I want to fight Austria. Well, use that to your advantage. Show them that the sick man of Europe may not be quite so sick as they originally thought. So I hope this gives you some ideas. I hope that those of you who are thinking about playing as the Ottomans are a little bit encouraged by this, because they do have a lot of potential, especially if the Allies do not press on them heavily very early in game. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, thoughts on other videos you might want to see, please indicate that down below. And I hope to get another video or two up soon.